Frank Fritz, the beloved co-host of American Pickers, left this world on September 30th, 2024, at the age of 60. But it wasn't just his unexpected passing that stirred emotions among his family and friends. It was the staggering fortune he left behind. A fortune that would not only redefine how his family saw him, but also spark tears, tensions, and perhaps a few surprises. But let's rewind the tape a little. Before we dive into the millions left in his wake, let's explore the final moments of a man who lived life on the road, picking through America's forgotten treasures, only to become one himself. It was no secret that Frank's health had been on the decline in the years leading up to his death. He'd suffered a stroke in 2022, and complications from that cerebral infarction would eventually lead to his passing 2 years later. According to TMZ, the death certificate stated the cause as late sequela of cerebral infarction, a clinical way of saying that the stroke had left lasting damage that his body couldn't recover from. But that wasn't all. Frank was also battling aortic stenosis, a condition that makes it difficult for blood to flow properly through the heart. It was a double blow, and even the strongest pickers can't haggle with fate. But here's where it gets even more human. Despite the health issues and personal struggles, Frank's story wasn't just about decline. It was about reconciliation, especially with his longtime friend and co-host, Mike Wolfe. The two had been thick as thieves since middle school, bonding over a shared love of picking and growing up without their fathers. But fame and fortune, they have a way of putting cracks in even the strongest friendships. By 2021, their relationship had hit rock bottom. Frank, in an interview with The Sun, wasn't shy about airing the dirty laundry. He accused Mike of turning American Pickers into a one-man show, comparing their dynamic to that of Steven Tyler and the rest of Aerosmith. "The show is tilted towards him 1,000%, Frank said. "It's like you've got Aerosmith and there's Steven Tyler. I found my spot, I'm second, and he's number one on the show." Ouch. But here's the twist no one saw coming. After Frank's stroke in 2022, the two began to mend their broken friendship. By 2023, they were talking again, and Mike wasn't about to let his friend go without making things right. "I got the call that he wasn't doing well," Mike told People. "I just feel blessed that I was able to get there." Mike described those final moments with a tenderness that could soften even the hardest hearts. "I was there for about an hour before he passed, and I was holding his hand and rubbing his chest when he took his last breath. I took my fingers, and I closed his eyes." Let that sink in for a moment. Two men who had shared more miles than most married couples, whose friendship had been tested by fame, fortune, and personal demons, found closure in the quietest, most intimate way possible. Mike told Frank he loved him. He wasn't mad anymore. And when Frank was struggling to hang on, Mike whispered, "Just go find your mom. Go find her right now." In that moment, it wasn't about antiques, TV ratings, or petty feuds. It was about two friends finding peace before the final curtain fell. But Frank Fritz wasn't just a man with a heartwarming story. He was a man who turned a childhood hobby into a multi-million-dollar empire. Born in Davenport, Iowa, Frank had been a collector from the start. Rocks, beer cans, you name it. But it wasn't until his days as a fire inspector, where he spent 25 years inspecting fire safety equipment, that he realized he could turn his passion for finding rare items into a career. By the time American Pickers premiered on the History Channel in 2010, Frank was already a seasoned picker. Alongside Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby, Frank crisscrossed the country in search of hidden treasures tucked away in barns, garages, and junkyards. The show quickly became a hit, resonating with viewers who loved the thrill of discovery and the nostalgia of forgotten Americana. Over 22 seasons and 300 episodes, American Pickers didn't just showcase antiques, it showcased Frank's sharp eye and infectious passion. His knack for spotting value in what others dismissed as junk turned him into a household name. And it wasn't just the TV show that lined his pockets. Frank authored 2 books, American Picker's Guide to Picking in 2011 and How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles in 2013. They were bestsellers that cemented his reputation as an authority in the world of antiques. And let's not forget Frank Fritz Finds, his antique shop in Savannah, Illinois. This was a thriving business that attracted collectors and fans from all over. By the time of his death, Frank's net worth was estimated at a cool $6 million. That's right. The man who once scoured junkyards for rusty signs and vintage motorcycles had amassed a fortune that many in the entertainment industry could only dream of. But here's the kicker. What happens to all that money? When someone leaves behind a fortune like that, you'd expect a few family members to shed tears, not just from grief, but from the weight of what's been left behind. Frank's passing didn't just leave an emotional void, it left a financial legacy that would change the lives of his loved ones forever. But not all tears are created equal. Some were tears of gratitude. Frank's generosity was well known, and those closest to him knew he'd taken care of them in his final days. But there were also tears of regret, of missed opportunities to reconcile, of words left unsaid. And then, of course, there were the inevitable tears of tension. Because when millions are at stake, even the closest families can find themselves at odds. But what did Frank's will say? Who stood to inherit his multi-million-dollar estate? Was it family, friends, or maybe even someone unexpected? Frank had the foresight to file his will in court a year before his death, on October 23, 2023. While his health had already been on a steady decline after his 2022 stroke, no one expected things to spiral as fast as they did. But Frank wasn't one to leave things to chance, at least not when it came to his finances. The U.S. Sun reported that Midwest One Bank, which had been appointed as his conservator following his stroke, was also named the executor of his estate. The will itself? Sealed tight. Whatever secrets lay within were locked away, but one thing was clear. The plans for his $6 million fortune were officially approved just weeks after his death, on October 18, 2024. But let's rewind to the moments leading up to that. When Frank suffered his debilitating stroke in July 2022 at his Iowa farmhouse, it was more than just a health scare. It was a turning point that shifted the control of his life from his own hands into those of others. His decision-making capacity was so impaired that he couldn't care for his basic needs: food, shelter, medical care. It wasn't long before loved ones filed for conservatorship and guardianship, thrusting Frank into a legal structure where his financial and personal affairs were handled by others. Midwest One Bank managed his finances, while his longtime friend Chris Davis stepped in as his guardian, overseeing everything from his Crohn's disease treatment to his physical therapy appointments. And then there was the matter of his prized possessions, his sprawling collection of antiques, vintage motorcycles, and memorabilia that filled outbuildings on his property like a museum of American nostalgia. The conservatorship papers revealed that while these treasures hadn't been fully inventoried, the plan was to keep them largely as they were, with select items used to stock his antique store, Fritz Finds, in Savannah, Illinois. But what about his family? Who were the people left behind in the wake of Frank's passing, and how did they fit into the narrative of his fortune? Here's where it gets complicated. Frank never married, despite rumors that circulated in 2021 about him tying the knot with his longtime girlfriend Diane. The truth? They had broken up well before his death, their relationship collapsing under the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. In an interview with The Sun in July 2021, Frank revealed that he had been planning to marry Diane, even buying a new house for them. But while he was on the road filming American Pickers, he discovered she had another boyfriend back home. It hurt my feelings, my self-esteem, and my whole world, Frank admitted. His response was to drown the pain in alcohol, a decision that marked the beginning of a long and painful struggle with addiction. Diane, for her part, denied Frank's version of events. "It's not true what he's saying," she told The Sun. "If he's trying to make me look like the bad person, of course I'm going to say it's not true because it's not." But whether or not her side of the story held water, the damage had been done. By 2019, the relationship was over, and Frank was left picking up the pieces of a life he thought he had figured out. So, without a wife or children, who did Frank consider family? Friends, that's who. People like Chris Davis, who became his guardian after the stroke, and Jerry Gendro, a longtime friend who spoke openly about Frank's final months. He felt really, really bad, Jerry recalled, describing visits to see Frank in the nursing home where one side of his body was completely paralyzed. He would lift his arm up and it would just drop. That's gotta be tough, to be totally bedridden. Frank's frustration was palpable. He couldn't articulate what he wanted to say, though some days were better than others. Jerry summed it up in a way that cut right to the core. "I think Frank could have lived a lot longer if the will to live would have been there." And then, of course, there was Mike Wolfe, the man who had been both Frank's closest friend and, at times, his bitter rival. Their relationship had been a roller coaster, from middle school buddies to co-hosts of one of the History Channel's biggest shows, and then to estranged colleagues. But by the time Frank's health took a turn for the worse, they had found their way back to each other. But for all the emotional closure, the question remained: did Mike Wolfe stand to inherit any part of Frank's fortune? It's hard to say. With the will sealed, the specifics of Frank's estate distribution are shrouded in mystery. What we do know is that Frank's financial legacy was intricately tied to his antique collection and his store, Fritz Finds. His friend Jerry hinted that an auction might be in the works, capitalizing on Frank's fan base to ensure that his treasures found homes with people who truly appreciated them. "That's what I would do because of his fan base," Jerry said. "I think he'll do really, really well with an auction." And while the antique world buzzed with speculation about the fate of Frank's collection, his family, both biological and chosen, grappled with the emotional weight of his passing. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the man who had left a lasting imprint on their lives, whose struggles with addiction and health had shaped his final years in ways that no amount of wealth could fix. Frank's battle with addiction had been a long and painful one, stemming not just from heartbreak, but from years of chronic pain due to Crohn's disease and a broken back. The latter required surgery in 2019, but recovery was far from smooth. Frank found solace in painkillers, but that solace quickly spiraled into dependency. By the time he left American Pickers in 2020, his addiction was no longer a secret among those closest to him. Mike Wolfe, in particular, had witnessed the toll it took on his friend. He became addicted to opioids, and that's when everything changed, Mike admitted. He staged interventions, encouraged rehab, and never gave up hope that Frank could find his way back. But just how much did Frank Fritz's battle with addiction and health issues cost him financially and emotionally? The answer might surprise you. At the height of his career, Frank was sitting on a comfortable $6 million nest egg. But by the time of his passing, a significant slice of that fortune had been funneled straight into healthcare. We're not talking about routine doctor visits or the occasional prescription refill. Frank was spending $30,000 a month on medical and in-home care after his stroke in 2022. That's nearly $360,000 a year, a staggering figure that even a reality TV star would struggle to sustain for long. This wasn't just about hospital bills. The costs covered round-the-clock nursing, physical therapy, and specialized treatments to manage not only the aftermath of his stroke, but also his ongoing battle with Crohn's disease and aortic stenosis. His Iowa farmhouse, once a haven filled with vintage motorcycles and rare antiques, had to be retrofitted with medical equipment and wheelchair ramps, turning it into more of a care facility than a home. Nestled in LeClaire, Iowa, Frank's home was as humble and unpretentious as the man himself. Originally purchased in 2010 for $130,000, the modest two-bedroom, one-bath property spanned 1,660 square feet and sat on 3/4 of an acre. But its value had tripled over the years, reaching $392,727 by 2024. Right next door, he owned an additional parcel of land zoned for single-family use, further adding to the property's worth. Yet, despite the property's increasing value, it wasn't enough to offset the avalanche of medical expenses. The farmhouse, once a symbol of his success and love for Americana, became a silent witness to his final years marked by physical decline and financial strain. But Frank Fritz was never just about money or material possessions. His real legacy lies in the lives he touched and the passion he ignited in millions of viewers. American Pickers wasn't just a TV show. It was a cultural phenomenon. Frank's sharp eye for antiques and his down-to-earth charm turned forgotten relics into treasured artifacts. He made us see value in the things we'd otherwise overlook: rusted gas station signs, vintage toys, old motorcycles gathering dust in a barn. For Frank, every item had a story, and every story was worth telling. And it wasn't just about the antiques. Frank's journey resonated with people because he was real. He wasn't polished or rehearsed. He was the guy next door with a knack for finding hidden gems and a heart full of humor and humility. He battled Crohn's disease openly, sharing his struggles with fans who saw their own health battles reflected in his story. He faced addiction and heartbreak, showing that even the people we admire most aren't immune to life's toughest challenges. After his departure from American Pickers in 2020, Frank continued to influence the antique world through his shop, Fritz Finds, in Savannah, Illinois. Even as his health declined, the store remained a hub for collectors and fans alike, a place where Frank's spirit lived on through the treasures he'd unearthed over the years. And now, even after his passing, that legacy continues. Plans are in motion to auction off parts of his prized collection, a move that not only honors his lifelong passion, but also helps recoup some of the financial toll his healthcare costs took on his estate. Fans will have the chance to own a piece of Frank's history, turning his life's work into cherished mementos that will be passed down through generations. But beyond the antiques, beyond the TV fame, Fritz leaves behind something far more valuable, a reminder that life is about the journey, not just the destination. He showed us that success isn't just about how much you earn, but about how much you love what you do. And even in his struggles, he taught us resilience, humility, and the importance of never giving up, no matter how rough the road gets. Frank once said, "Life is what you put into it. If you don't put much into it, you don't get a lot out of it." He put everything into his work, his friendships, and his passions, and while his fortune may have dwindled in the face of medical bills, his impact remains priceless. His legacy lives on in the treasures he discovered, the people he inspired, and the countless memories he left behind. And while the road may have been rough, Frank rode it with heart, humor, and an unbreakable spirit that will never be forgotten.